on. I've known you for well, a few years now, so time really flies. I think the first time we met was at Poma in maybe Wichita, Kansas, something
What
like that.
I was trying to think of that before coming on the show, and I think the last time I saw you in person was in Franklin, maybe in Tennessee.
It might have been
Time
Franklin.
flies.
Yeah. Oh man, and it just seems like it's going faster too the older we get. And so anyway, a lot of people might not be familiar with who you are, even though you're really big in the livestock ranching and just overall outdoor space. So, you want to go ahead and give an intro to who you are, so that people kind of see where you're coming from.
Sure. Do I need to give a 30-second version or an
Oh
actual
no,
overall
just go
version?
ahead and yeah, we've got time. So
Um, so yeah, it's something that I've been working on over the years is my elevator speech. And that's something that's challenging because just as Aaron just said, I do a lot of things. Here in Colorado, I live on a ranch. We raise cattle and they are athletes. They're rodeo cattle that are used for roping and different events like that. And then we also sell them as protection animals, and some people use them for meat because obviously you can eat them as well. But I'm also a licensed outfitter. I'm kind of retired in that avenue. As Aaron mentioned, the older we get, we kind of change directions. And so now I'm a regional representative for Safari Club International for the state of Colorado. And I'm also our chairman for regional representatives. So I travel from state to state and I work on a lot of hunting issues. I used to work on a lot of issues in Colorado, but now there's not enough Mia to go around. So I'm happy that we have other SCI people that are showing up at the table, and that's really important. But I do a lot of mentored hunts. I do hunter education classes. I mentor new hunters that maybe have never even touched a firearm. I teach anglers. I teach archery and firearms and safety and self defense. So I do a ton of things. There's probably even more than that, but that's kind of a little snapshot.
nice. Yeah, I didn't realize that you were raising rodeo livestock.
Mhm.
Um, so that's pretty interesting. What you said protection animals. So what sort of livestock are you using for protection animals? Because I always see you with your corgi, and I don't know what he's really protecting against.
Yeah. So, with a protection animal, and we'll get to talking about wolves in our conversation, is what I'm gathering from our
Sure.
pre conversations leading up to today. But over the years, I also neglected to mention that I am the vice chair of the Colorado Cattlemen's Wildlife Committee. And 3 years ago, they took several of us up to tour the Blackfoot Project up in Montana. And that's a project that's been going on for about 25 years. And it's showing how ranchers can live with wild animals. With up there, it's grizzly bears and wolves. And what they look for are horned cows that can fight off wolves. And so we've had some people that want to buy our cows are a little more aggressive, and they want to buy cows that can protect their beef cows. And that's something that's controversial because for me, um, I don't want my cows to be killed by a wolf. And just because they are aggressive and have horns doesn't mean they're going to fight off a pack of wolves. So they can and
Yeah.
cannot.
Yeah, and so the other thing, I mean, elk have horn or antlers also that and they get killed by wolves all the time, so it's yeah, and buffalo and all that kind of stuff. So it's not sure I think that it's a maybe a good idea to an extent, but um man, that makes it tough. Like how do you really have to get outside of that emotional divide there for your animals because you spend a lot of time raising these animals and caring for them and stuff like that, and then to know that they're going to be out there and basically sacrificial animals,
Mhm.
it kind of has got to be tough.
It is tough, and it's something. That over the years, it's hard to explain to maybe a wolf advocate. And something like I said in the capacity, I've been on the Colorado Sports Persons Roundtable. I initially, I think, served my first term in like 2012, kind of going back over the years, but I've served 3 or 4 terms on that roundtable. And through that, I've been pulled in. I was part of the wolf focus groups before in the introduction and stuff like that. And something that people have told me is like try to the wolf advocates and a lot of different people. I've been part of their sociology experiments. I've been on roundtables where I know every time I speak they're writing down so they can figure out how I think and then what their next maneuver is going to be. And that's something that's challenging in itself, and it's actually really exhausting emotionally, but it's hard to explain to these people. We do put a lot of care and time into raising these animals, um, but then also we can take them and kill them and use them for food.
Yeah,
And it's something also years ago, you mentioned Poma, and years ago up in where is it? Up in Montana, we had a Poma conference up there, northern
Kalispell.
Kalispell. I wanted to say
Yeah.
Keystone. In Kalispell, Jim Zumbo, in one of our roundtables, he posed the question, and I contemplate it all the time when I'm outside. Just this morning, I was sitting on my back patio watching geese fly by, and 2 flocks, one crossed another, and then they actually circled back and joined. But how is it as a hunter that I can sit there and be in awe of these geese? And I just love to see these wild animals, but yet I can also, when hunting season comes, I can kill a goose and eat it. And that's something that I've tried over the years and through this wolf introduction is how do we explain that to somebody who's not a hunter or to somebody who's never raised their own food? Um, I have a garden as well, and it's like I put all this time and care into raising my vegetables and fruits, and then I lop them off and bring them into the kitchen, and eat
Yeah.
them. And I don't know if somebody can give me an answer to that. I would love it because I've got more roundtable meetings coming up where I'm going to sit with these people, and what I find is they want me to understand them, but they don't want to understand me.
So I have to deal with this a lot. Um, and a lot of it comes from, really, I think it's a disconnect between the urban and rural divide,
Mhm.
where we live in these, and I don't know, I've like shouted this from the rooftop when I talked about this with Tom and Livy Opry and several different people, but it seems like that because people are now in these urban environments, they no longer know how their food is cultivated. And because they don't have to actually get out there and do the dirt work, they no longer see that the animal has to die, and how it actually gets on their plate. Because most of the people that I end up interacting with about this subject are people that are like, well, I couldn't do this. Just go to I get it all the time. Go to the grocery store, something like that. And it's like, well, you do realize that meat actually comes from an animal. It doesn't just grow in the grocer's freezer. And so one of the things that I have to tell them is, look, I understand that it's a dirty job, and so is cleaning your septic tank, but somebody still has to do it. Somebody still has to provide food. The only difference between us as hunters and you at the grocery store is we are much more connected with how it is that we're actually cultivating our food. We don't have that missed step in between. We see all of the dirty details that happen in between. And even if I do encounter vegans that are, oh no, no animals should die and stuff like that. Um, I bring up all of the different animal byproduct um, things that that they use on a daily basis that without even knowing it. And I pose the question to them, okay, so what do we do and how do we come up with the funding in order to eliminate all of these animal byproducts that we need for products that we're using on a daily basis and that you're using on a daily basis? And I always try and approach it that way rather than, oh, you're just stupid, get out of here, because that's not going to help anybody. And there's no way that they're going to look at it from our side if we don't try and explain a little bit about it. And you do get people that are closed off to it, of course, that just don't want to listen at all. But every once in a while, I do end up encountering people where they're like, well, I didn't think about it this way, or I didn't know that there were so many different animal byproducts. I didn't know that, our body needed this much minerals and stuff like that, different things like that. And then finally, one of the other things that I come across to them with is pests. They're always looking for ways to get rid of pests. And for some reason, it's okay if an animal kills another animal, but it's not okay if we kill another animal. But at the same time, they acknowledge the fact that we are animals. So it's a really weird dichotomy that I try and breach that
Yeah.
with them. So
And that's something that in all the roundtables and different I'm on the governor's outdoor partnership and I represent hunters on there, sports persons on there. But it's something that's I like to be engaged because you get to interact with these other genres. Okay. On there, the outdoor partnership brings together kayakers, mountain bikers, motorized vehicles, the insect people, all the different avenues so that we can have a healthy habitat and wild area with recreation spaces overlapped. And so when you come together at those tables, you can foster relationships and then you can have these conversations because it's not as though I have actually been in an elevator with somebody that I've had a great hunting conversation and left them very positively impact and they're curious. And so you can do that, but it's not entirely common. You don't usually make
right.
a good impact in that short of a time. And so I mentioned in Colorado, I have different SEI chapters in the state, and our Colorado chapter president, he's very engaged, and he's going to the Capitol and stuff like that too. So it's nice. But also, I'm just mentioning two of us, and as the wolves came, as we've had attacks on bobcat and mountain lion hunting and different things, then people become engaged. And it's like, then we're fighting and you're coming with fists. Okay. And to me, that's not the time. I mean, yes, we need to show up, we need to do that. But also, when those things are not happening, hunters have to show up, join these round tables, join the caucuses. It's uncomfortable sometimes, and what I see is a lot of times we're fighting amongst each other, like, oh, well, you didn't support my archery hunting thing, so I hate you, or, like things like that. And it's like we have to come together unified. And I hear this more and more nowadays, but also you have to show up. And even if you work a 9 to 5 job, you can, we just recently here in the county where I live in Southwest Colorado, we had a cattlemen's meeting with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and they came down here to talk to us about wolves because the next wolf drop will be in Gunnison, which is in our region, Southwest region. Okay. As the crow flies, people are like, "Oh, that's far away," and
It's not.
I've been up
They
scouting for
travel so
moose in the
much.
wilderness, and I'm like, "Look at this map. This is 20 miles, and yeah, we've got to go, 150 miles around to get from A to B, but the wolves are just going to go straight over." And so, but at this meeting, nobody showed up. There are very few, just those few that are engaged that showed up. And I don't know whether it would have been productive or not. I mean, I try to show up all the time. when I can be in a certain place, but um, they're not engaged. And there were wolf advocates there that you can have conversations with. And through that, I have an email on my desk right now from somebody that wants to sit down and have a conversation. And eventually we'll have a conversation. And in the email, I'm pretty sure they just want me to understand them. But through the conversation, I also want them to understand me. And we may leave understanding or not. But people really have to be engaged so you can have those side conversations. And like if just you are having a conversation or just me, we can impact that one person. But how many hunters are there in the world that can have the conversation and make more of an impact?
Yeah.
So
Give me just one second. My cat is at the door and I don't know if you can hear it, but it's driving me
my
nuts. It's
corgi does that on occasion. You'll hear the or scratch.
sorry about that. She's sitting there and meowing, and she's been doing it for like 10 minutes.
I couldn't hear her, but I like I said, I've had that before.
So you brought up a bunch of really, really interesting points. So man, where do I start? There's just so much with that. When it comes to the wolf side of things, it's really weird because people get so attached to those animals, and they're beautiful animals,
Mhm.
but they're so attached to them that they don't want to they don't want to argue with logic and facts, and to the point where they're willing to make up facts.
Yes.
Like just what happened, I think I texted you about this. The um one of the wolves was trapped, and they said that it died due to the injuries from the trapping the next day. Well, a couple different things that, besides the fact that I have two different sources within CPW and Wildlife Services that contradict that and say that the animal did not actually die from that. It's unrelated causes, and they're doing a necropsy on it. Um, Besides that, it just that really says a lot about, if the animal did die due to the injuries, why did CPW even release that wolf? If it was going to be that bad, there's no reason that they should have even released it. And so if they're really trying to push the wolves out there and stuff like that, I mean, that's just bad optics in general, right? So you have stuff like that, and then you have subjects where you've got the Yellowstone project and stuff like that. Everybody likes to come back to the Yellowstone project where they did that documentary and the wolves changed the waters, and the wolves are bringing back aspen trees and like all kinds of stuff like that. And it's like, eh, it's ridiculous if you really look at it as a totality. And they like to look at it and they say or correlation is causation, and that's not the case. Like for instance, when we talk about the waters and stuff like that, well, right now Yellowstone is having a huge issue with buffalo eroding away the banks and stuff like that. So because there's a bunch of buffalo and the wolves don't want to go after the buffalo because of course they're bigger, it's harder for them to get down and stuff like that, right? uh, and those buffalo are walking on the banks and just eroding the banks. But if we look at it in the past, there were 125 beavers that were dropped around the same time that the wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone. but they say, well, the wolves started killing away all the elk and stuff like that and moving them up into the mountains. And so now the beavers were able to come back. And well, the beavers were able to come back because we introduced 125 beavers into that area, so it's they don't look at it like that. And then with regard to the aspen trees, we had the huge fire that happened that just completely cleared out a lot of the vegetation and stuff like that so that they could grow. So it's just because you did one thing uh, doesn't mean that all of these other things that were going on at the same time did not play an effect. I'm not saying that wolves didn't have some sort of a contribution to it, but you can't look at it and say this is the reason.
Well,
You
and
know?
the wolves are a piece of the ecosystem. And that's something when they're putting their one talking point is it's a system. It's
Yeah,
not the one thing. It's a whole conglomeration of things. And I'm not sure why we neglect everything else that's in the system.
yeah. It's crazy. I did just see too where Colorado is looking at bringing in wolverines,
Yeah. And
and
so one thing with that is we've already had wolverines, not a ton of them, but they come in and out. We already had wolves before the ballot
Mhm.
initiative, before they were introduced. We already had wolves. One thing I will say with the wolf introduction is it forced us to form a plan in a much more rapid pace than we would have with the rate they were coming in prior. Um, I'll look at that as a positive from that scenario there. But the Wolverines, they actually were from here, but something is we're rewilding. We want to have these wild animals, yet we keep putting our human hand on the animals. And I don't understand how that's wild. Like we're going
Yeah,
to capture them, we're going to put them in a containment facility for a while, and then we're going to release them. But it's wild, and
yeah.
so I don't know what kind of wild this wild is.
Well, and the interesting thing about the whole rewilding project is there was just a video release, and I don't know if it was from Town Hall. I had posted it and got almost 100,000 views on it, I think. But it was what was the guy's name? Um, Glenn Patton, I think is his name, but he's a writer for rewilding.org. And he basically said, I mean, he said the quiet part out loud and said, well, I think that we should start taking these properties from people basically
Yeah.
through eminent domain, and it should be voluntary in the beginning. Who's going to voluntarily sell their property?
The cattlemen.
The,
So this I'm not saying they're selling their properties, but I mentioned our trip to the Blackfoot. I mentioned Parks and Wildlife coming down to prepare us for wolves down here. And basically, what they taught us at the Blackfoot, what they brought the message to the cattlemen's meeting here a week or two ago, um, they have help for us, they have tools. What we can do is we can get funding from organizations, and I'm not going to name any of them, but certain organizations will give us as cattlemen money to buy our tools and money to pay for range riders, money to buy guardian donkeys or guardian cattle, this type of thing. Part of that is signing away and you're putting your property into conservation easements. You're taking the conservation funding. The property is not yours to manage anymore. And that's just step one of selling away your land. And it's happening. I'm seeing it everywhere, honestly. And the cattlemen buy into it because it's a way to get the funding. It's comfortable, it's security, and but also you're not in charge anymore. It's not yours, and it's all over the place, Aaron. It's there's I could go on and on about that, but basically in the Blackfoot, we toured several ranches and there was only one who had a lethal means of protecting his livestock. His range rider had a handgun on her belt, and I we cornered him and asked him what's going on, and he said, "I don't take the funding."
Wow. That's that's crazy. So they're basically selling this conservation easement um, program, I guess, as a way for help,
Mhm.
but basically it's just a way for them to control everything.
Yep, 100%.
Uh, that's kind of reminiscent, I think, of what's going on across the nation when it comes to food production and stuff like that. Um, it seems like just one more step in how they, how they gain control over everything. And I've already read reports down there in Colorado because the wolves are on certain ranches. They're pushing ranchers away from those areas where they can't have their cows in that paddock. Um, and I call it a paddock, but you and I both know it's it's more than just like a paddock. I mean, we're talking thousands of acres sometimes.
Yeah.
Um,
They're allotments, and on the Forest Service, it's allotments, and this is something when we're looking at tools right now, when they came down I shared a recording in, one of the groups, a wolf group that I'm in on Facebook, and it's a recording of Adam Baca, who is our, wolf conflict management specialist. He came from Montana Fish and Wildlife Services. He worked on the conflict up there. He also continually mentions Defenders of Wildlife in all his conversations. And they also offer this money to the ranchers. And I said I wouldn't mention organizations, but he mentions them a lot. Um, but in that conversation, they want to come onto the ranches to do site assessments before the wolves are here. And that's something I don't let a lot of people on my property, because it's mine, it's private property. That's where these easements and crossings and stuff like that. I'm one of the ones that it's my property. I don't really want people on it. That's why I have what I have. But they want to come do the site assessments ahead of time. And one of the ranchers during that meeting in La Plata County asked, "Are you going to come and assess my allotments?" So that's acreage up on the US federal land, up on the Forest Service land. Some of them may have BLM land, I'm not positive. But the conversations were continually steered away from that. They don't want to go and do an assessment on that land. They want to come and assess your property.
really? How do they how do they get on to your property
You
in
give them
order?
permission. You have to give them
Okay.
permission to come.
Okay. Unless I'm assuming if you have that conservation easement that they're talking about, I'm assuming they could
Yeah.
probably do it that way.
Yes. Yeah. With a conservation easement, I've had old time ranchers that are in the area that have big parcels of property. 20, 30 years ago, they put their properties into conservation easements because they didn't want their kids to fight when they were gone and have their ranches subdivided. So that was a way of keeping that as one big unit of property. But I've been hunting on those properties before, and you see this like van pull up and 20 people come out and they're, tromping across the property because they're doing tours looking at birds or, looking at wildlife on the property or something like that. And it varies with the easement. I mean, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation helps with conservation projects too, but I think it's something where a lot of times people don't read the fine print and it's more, we have one core value, and maybe voters do this too. We have one core value. I'm only going to vote for gun stuff, or I'm only going to vote for pro choice or whatever. And we don't look at the whole big picture of what is affected in, a bill or something like that. So it's just a way when they're asking to come and do a site assessment, what they would do is look, like you mentioned, a paddock. We're going to look and see at where your calving facility is and how it might be attracting a predator, how you're dealing with carcasses and your carcass management, if you have composting and that kind of stuff would be part of a site assessment. And it's something that through the CSU, the Colorado State University, they actually teach composting, and we're working on projects to do education to all the ranchers so they can understand that. A lot of ranchers, when you have a huge, a cow, a horse, or something big, what generally happens is there are pits where you put them and then bury it. But those pits sometimes can remain open, and that would be an attractant to a wolf. Or we don't have verified grizzlies in Colorado, but there are lots of reports. Um, but that would be an attractant for them. And so that's something that they would work with you to say, oh, you've got this, this is going to bring something in, and let's work on this. And we can give you tools to build this. And here's the funding. Here's where you
Yeah.
can go get money.
So real quick on that, I actually have a friend that he's not from anywhere in the West. He's from the East Coast, but he actually ran across a sow grizz and a cub, and he took a picture and all that kind of stuff. Gave me a point, and it was in Colorado. Um, he was there hunting in Colorado, and he showed me the picture. Or he sent me the picture. I don't know. This has been, I don't know. It's got to be 6 or 7 years ago now.
Hmm.
Um, and he goes, it, people are telling me that this is a color phase black bear, and I'm like, no, no, that was a big sow. There was no confusing that one. I mean, it just it's a sow grizz. And I said, where was that? And he goes, I'll send you a pin. So he sent me a pin. I'll be damned. It was in Colorado, and it was probably 100 miles into Colorado.
Yeah. And that's something, like I said, we hear reports of it all the time, and Colorado Parks and Wildlife hasn't confirmed it. As far as I know, as of yet, they haven't confirmed it. But if you go look, I also didn't mention I'm an outdoor writer. I write hunting articles, primarily gun articles, but a lot of hunting as well. And if you go do research on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service about depredations to ranchers and stuff in Colorado, there actually is on their statistics grizzly depredation. So I don't know how
Really?
I don't know how that works.
Wow. That's interesting.
Hmm.
So they admit it without actually admitting it, I guess.
I don't know. It was an interesting. I was researching statistics for a different report, and I saw that, and I was like, "Wait, we don't have grizzly, but it says there's a grizzly depredation." So,
Yeah. So one of the other things that I thought was pretty interesting about what you were saying is the collection sites and stuff like that, the pits,
mhm.
basically. So I was on a ranch over in Ronan, Montana, and of course they've got grizzlies, wolves, they've got all kinds of stuff. Um, and one of the ranchers, well, actually, it was the one that I was on. He has basically a pit. He doesn't cover it over, but he's been working with the FWP and different organizations, the road crews and stuff like that. And he allows them to dump on his property. I guess his mentality behind it is, well, at least they're congregating there and they're not congregating on other people's properties. But uh, also with the studies and stuff like that, they're doing hair collection samples, they're doing all kinds of stuff, at that site so they can see what bears might be in the area, what the population density is, stuff like that. How they interact, how they come up to food sites, and so hopefully and they even do, if I remember saying this correctly, different deterrent studies and stuff like that, um, in that area. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Um, Now it was kind of unnerving being on his property and knowing that there's a dump site like right there. And I mean, you're seeing grizzly sign everywhere. Like that's the most grizzly sign that I've ever seen in my life. And probably the second most was up there by Kalispell, Columbia Falls. Um, we found 11 piles of bear crap within a quarter mile on a trail. And it
Wow.
was like, holy, that's a lot, right? There was more at this place. And so, I mean, you're just constantly on edge, the entire time, right? But
Yeah.
yeah.
Wait, you said they were doing some studies there. When we were in the Blackfoot, they were working with these, they must have been about 4 foot by 8 foot sheets of metal that's kind of like a cattle guard, but not with the poles. It was just solid sheets of metal, and they'd electrify those. So when the bears tried to come into the compost area, they get shocked, and then different like fencing and stuff to try to deter the grizzlies. And I thought that was really interesting because it's just a matter of like educating yourself. And yes, we want to know the tools, and that was something that I'm like, eventually that's probably going to be something we may need to deal with. So it's nice to know there's tools out there that you could maybe purchase, or I'm a welder, maybe I could make it myself.
Yeah. So one of the other things that is pretty interesting about Colorado is your all out attack on firearms.
Hmm.
Um, why is that? I mean, is it the urban side, or is it coming from a political standpoint? Because most of Colorado is really rural.
Hmm. I
Um,
think Colorado, like many states, were dictated by the metro areas. So the metro area in Colorado is growing, it's expanding. It used to just be like the Denver, Boulder area. Now it's trickled down into Colorado Springs. If you look at the map, the voting maps, we've got La Plata County in Durango, Colorado. It's a college town. It's voting anti-gun quite a bit now, and then the Grand Junction area is now kind of it's just growing. We had a mass influx of escapees from California that Montana's seeing that too, and I'm hoping that Montana can hold back and educate those people that to not create what they left. But I think that's something here is those new residents don't understand, and it's very fear based. I believe the voting is, and um, I'm a member of the Women for Gun Rights and have gone to DC advocate for firearms and stuff like that. And it's just very misunderstood. And again, it's something where people just really need to be educated. They don't understand that it's not the gun, it's the people. And I think during the pandemic, some people realized they needed a means of defense, where other people are like, if nobody had guns, we would all be safe and it would be a peaceful world. And it's like, well, since biblical times, people have been fighting with one another. So I choose to protect my family, and that doesn't mean they have to. You mentioned about hunting, like some people are like, that's too much work. I don't want to do that. Well, you don't have to, but that doesn't mean that you have to deter me from. For me, hunting is health. And I mean, as I mentioned, I've been out in the wilderness scouting, and I told my husband, like, I have a lot of myalgia, and I see a functional medicine doctor that's been really helping me. But when I go out in the wilderness and I'm disconnected, I feel so great, and
mhm.
it's like they want to take that away from us, and it's unhealthy. It's like, why do you want us all to be so unhealthy?
Yeah. And it really is. I mean, it literally saved my life getting back into the outdoors and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
um, it's I
It
don't know.
helps it helps with PTS, it helps with
Oh yeah.
just our mental health, and I think through all of everything we've talked about, something that always comes back is, people don't wanna do the hard work of hunting, but instead they're, skydiving with that's our adrenaline, where if you're out in the woods trying to, put a stock on something, your adrenaline goes, "Oh, I'm not successful," then it drops, and it's that is the kind of adrenaline that we get instead of, "Oh, I'm gonna be on Amazon, push button, order, it's on my doorstep, push button, order, it's on my
Hmm.
doorstep," because people are addicted to that, and, um, instead of being outside and connected to nature where you kinda get rid of that, the spending and modern day addictions that fill that void.
Yeah, well, physiologically, it's the dopamine receptors and stuff like
Yes.
that, right? Um, it feels good, and they've actually measured this. Like when you get likes and stuff like that on a video, you get addicted to that dopamine hit that you get. The same sort of thing happens with cortisol. Um,
Mhm.
and like different stressors and stuff like that. Like one of the most addictive drug ever is adrenaline. And they've actually measured this against some of the most addictive drugs that we have, and it measures right up there with it,
Mhm.
where you just get, and that's why a lot of veterans and stuff, that like former combat vets and stuff like that, they're like, they go out and they do these really extreme things because they long for that hit, you know. uh, Actually, that's probably why I do what I do. um, you know, but you know, I- the whole gun rights debate, and I had Taryn Dar on here, and we've talked about it before too, and as of yesterday, actually, we just had a shooting here, uh, like 30 minutes away from where I live. Um, you know, I understand everybody's reservations about guns, but what seems to me is really interesting about it is they highlight all of these things that happen, right? These shootings and stuff, while they're tragic. I completely understand that, but they don't highlight all of the robberies and murders that happen through stabbings and just all of that stuff, you know? So to me, it looks like they're just out for one perspective,
Mhm.
not looking at crime as a whole, or things like that, or any other um, situation. Like you look at wolves, for instance, like the wolf that was caught in the trap. How much airtime did that get? Right? I mean, you're talking about one wolf that that died, and let's just say that maybe he died because, or she died because of the trap, right? Well, you're talking about one wolf versus all of the problems that are happening around the United States at the moment, or even around Colorado at the moment. Is that really the hill you want to die on? I mean, is that really the narrative that you want to push?
I think some of why they push those narratives is because you can focus on a single point like that, but to focus on, say, mental health, it's so much more broad. It's so much more challenging because mental health is why we have shootings. Instead of there are little projects going on, such as, like I said, mentoring these people who have never hunted before, getting them outside, giving them a community, giving them. It's really cool to see when you have somebody who, you show up at camp and you're like, oh well, this guy's a hippie. Like, what's he doing here? And you hear the conversations with the hunters in the camp, and then in the end of camp, like everybody's friends, they exchange numbers. Some of them go hunting together. They'll send pictures. They stay in touch, and that's what we need is a togetherness and a community. And what I'm finding is that those news reports just divide and divide and divide, and it's easy to attack the one thing, the gun. Like, the gun is the evil thing, but then you do, like, you hear about somebody coming in with a machete, and that's something that happened in Mexico, and
Yep.
it's
I
just,
literally just saw that.
yeah. And so they had guns, they don't have to use their guns, gun taking away guns isn't going to fix those little things where people need to care about people, but there's always going to be somebody who disagrees, And I mean, we can learn hand to hand stuff to self defense to protect ourselves. We can have a gun to protect ourselves. We can learn how to use knives to protect ourselves. But someday that may happen. And what I see a lot is that in people's minds, they're just like, that would never happen, and they point blank think that would never happen. And I don't think they would ever believe it until it was in their house, and then they'll believe
Yeah.
it.
So my younger brother was actually shot. He was shot twice, and his friend was shot once in a home invasion. Um, a bunch of, I think it was five individuals came in broad daylight, kicked in his front door, busy street in South Carolina. Um, Kicked in his door, went to rob the house, and they sat all of them down on the couch. And before they left, they just started shooting, and even were shooting at people on the road as they were driving by. And it hit my brother twice. He got hit by a 9 millimeter and a 45. And both of them were leg wounds. One of them cut his artery, and he ended up having to tie off his leg, and that was actually what saved his life. Um, but when they found him, he was unconscious. But had those people not shot at people that were driving by, the police would have never gotten to him in time. Um, and even still, after those people had called, it was about 20 minutes before they had arrived.
Hmm.
So, what is your line of defense if something like that happens? And it does happen. Like, I never thought that that would happen to my family. You know, um, what's your line of defense? I mean, what can you do? Sure, you can put up maybe an ADT sign, and maybe that'll keep some people away, or cameras, maybe that'll help. But even there in Mexico, they caught that guy on camera using a machete. So some people just don't care, and there is evil out there in the world, no matter how you look at it, and not from a spiritual perspective. I mean, there are just people that are absolutely evil
Yeah.
that
And do you read very much, Erin? Do you read books?
I try to.
Have you read
Yeah.
The Assassination Generation?
I haven't, no.
It's a book by Gavin de Becker. I read a lot of books, but The Assassination Generation by Gavin de
Okay.
Becker, it's a story about video games aggression and the psychology of killing. And this book, it's very eye opening to our psychology and how our minds are manipulated. I mean, you mentioned social media earlier. Social media has changed all of our minds. Just I watch you on TikTok, and it's like the social media changes our brains, but that talks about the psychology of why some of the school shooters, why they do what they do, how a youngster could point blank shoot someone, their grandmother, in the head.
Hmm.
Which you were military. I don't know your experience in military, but generally, like when we're training, it's chest and then head, chest, head. But
Hmm.
to look at somebody in years ago, if you were going to shoot someone in the head, it's behind because you don't want to actually see their face because you have empathy in your heart. Even somebody evil might have empathy, but the rewiring of these youngsters' brains, they don't have the empathy anymore. And I think if you look back just 10 years ago, we had the keyboard warriors that were attacking you with their comments on social media and stuff like that. Well, now they're doing it in person because it's been desensitized. So now they'll come to your face and tell you something, and you're kind of taken aback. Like, it's just that humanity has changed. And that's why I keep saying it's the mental thing that I feel like we need to focus on, but it's not an easy solution because there's so much money behind social media, behind video games, pornography, and stuff like that. That I don't. It's just too big of a monster. So we'll go after guns.
Yeah.
After we could take your guns, we'll take your knives. We'll bring wolves, and then we'll get rid of your hunting, and we'll take over your land. It's just this big picture, and maybe that's not the initial intention. I'm trying to give the benefit of the doubt, but it's dominoes. You're going to take this, so we're going to take away rifles, then we're going to take away shotguns, then we're going to take away handguns. Nobody's talking about muzzle loaders and how far they can shoot and how much impact they have, but it's just the dominoes. And you just have to stay active and engaged and work hard to try to stop it, because the pendulum eventually needs to swing the other way.
Yeah. And you had mentioned something earlier about hunters fighting amongst themselves. And I've been seeing this a lot because I've been following different wolf advocate um social medias and stuff like that because I want to understand where they're coming from, so that I can at least eloquently talk enough about their perspective, uh, and how it relates to my perspective, right? And one of the things that I see a lot, uh, and I saw this, I don't know how many times, there was tons of comments when that wolf was caught in the trap, is hunters saying, and self admitted hunters saying, trapping is not ethical and nobody should be killing animals that they can't eat. Um, well, that's one of the big things that I saw was they can't eat uh, some of these animals, or they don't eat these animals, so you shouldn't kill anything that you don't eat. Uh, Different things like that. And so I see these hunters fight each other all the time. And all it does is create dissension. And especially when you're doing it on groups like that, where now it looks like, okay, well, even hunters agree with the wolf reintroduction. And even hunters agree that wolves are a good thing and that we shouldn't be killing wolves and stuff like that. And that's just wrong. I mean, they don't, and a lot of these hunters, you and I talk about this all the time, or, some of our other colleagues and stuff in the outdoor industry talk about it all the time about management of just wildlife, period. Right. Well, a lot of other hunters do not understand the purpose of needing management. And that's as it relates and kind of coming full circle when it comes back to the livestock and the ranching side of things, right? All of this has to create a big circle and everything has to work together. And if we're not managing the wolves and stuff like that, not saying they don't need to be on the landscape, but there should be full transparency. There should be a good form of management, and everything should be clear when it comes to all that, not creating all of these different divides. Well, you're trying to kill this wolf and you're hurting my feelings, or blah blah. Like, I see this stuff all the time. you know what's your perspective on that? Because how do we keep hunters from internally eating our own?
That's a big topic on that aspect, because, well, first you said the T word, transparency. That's
Yeah.
something, I want to talk about that first, because I told you that I was on different focus groups. I've been interviewed for interviews for positions that in the end I know they were just analyzing me and my thoughts and stuff like that. But in the interviews and some of the surveys that I received, they're asking for tips going forward. How are we going to make this work? And it's CPW needs to be transparent, 100% transparent, because there is such a lack of trust with the agency. And now what I'm seeing in the state is there's even a divide on the pro wolf side, the wolf advocates that want them here, and voters that voted for them, because it's like half the state voted, half this for them, half didn't. Um, but that transparency is so important in all aspects because now we've got people who didn't want them that are not trusting and people who did want them that are not trusting. And what's happening is there's a breakdown of the agency. And so I'm sure you've seen how they want to create a new agency that oversees the agency that's directed by someone else. And it's really going to hurt the management aspect. And so getting to that, um, we've got ranchers contribute to wildlife with habitat. We manage habitat so that we can feed our cattle. We also we know that elk may come through my pasture. I personally like when I see elk because we don't have as many elk as we used to, but other ranchers are upset when they see the elk come through. But we build habitat for waterfowl. We build habitat for small game. I talk about one of my properties. We have bobcats on there. On this one, we have badgers. So we have habitat for a lot of different species, and that's where we keep putting like this one animal is the priority. And when I teach hunter ed and you teach conservation, we want to have a balance of all these animals. In New Mexico, they got rid of trapping, and they used to have their grouse down there were coming back. Now they're on the endangered species again, and it's like, well, because you're not managing those predators that we don't eat, theoretically don't eat, because some of those predators I do eat. But that's why you kill bobcats. That's why you kill skunks. That's why you kill raccoons, is because then you can have those game birds coming back. And I call them game birds because I'm a hunter.
Hmm.
For a wildlife watcher, you might want to just view grouse or, different birds. I enjoy eating them and I enjoy pursuing them. But something that I've also realized, I mentioned functional medicine, and I just went to a leadership summit. Okay. And at the leadership summit, they're like, "What do you do?" And it's like, "I'm an outdoor writer." Well, what do you write about? And they're thinking hiking as hunting and guns, and well, you don't look like a hunter. Well, what do hunters look like?
Yeah, exactly. What
What
does
does
a
a hunter
hunter
look?
look like?
And same with you mentioned the 2A stuff. Like, what does a gun owner look like? Like, here I am, and you probably didn't know I had a gun the whole entire time, that kind of
Hmm.
thing. Because it's something that we have these biases that we're preconditioned with primarily from TV and social media. But in talking to them, I told them I drew this moose tag. Like, what's exciting to you right now? What brings you joy? This moose tag is like so exciting to me. I mean, for me, it's a once in a lifetime draw
Yeah.
because I won't apply again. You could apply again if I didn't kill a moose during season. And that's something where they're like, what? You could potentially not kill a moose? And it's like, yeah, when you hunt, you're not always going to get what you're chasing. They don't understand that. But for me, if I don't happen to get a moose, I'm leave it open for the next guy. That's my bad for I can't say I won't try enough because I'm gonna put my all into it. But then through the conversation, also, oh, well, I saw one up here by Aspen or whatever. And it's like, well, that's not in my unit. And they're
Yeah.
like, what? What do you mean not in my unit? And then I have to explain to them hunting, it's by season. Like, when do you start hunting? What can you use to hunt? Where can I hunt? And this is something that non-hunters don't understand. And so there's this whole education process that people have to bring back. We're not just going out there, okay, I have a moose tag, so today I'm going to go out there and shoot the first moose that I see. Or same with a badger. I mentioned badgers earlier. So I can't just go shoot a badger. I have to have a small game license. I have to have
Yeah.
hunter education. I have to have the season. And non hunters don't know that. And we're working on ways to better educate them so they can kind of understand more. Because primarily, the greater population of the United States is okay with hunting. And when they think hunting, they're thinking deer primarily, like deer.
Hmm.
And you're going to shoot the deer, you're going to eat the deer. But why would I want to shoot that coyote? Because I used to have turkeys on the property. Now I have, foxes and skunks and raccoons, and now the turkeys are gone.
Yeah.
That balance is more than just being about one wolf.
Yeah. Well, you brought up New Mexico, and I'm not going to mention the organization that he works for, but there is still trapping that the government
Yeah.
of New Mexico pays for to go in and trap coyotes and trap, different predator species and stuff, especially as it relates to antelope and stuff like that. Because one of the big narratives, and he and I have been going back and forth for weeks now about the whole Dan Flores things when it when he talks about coyotes, he like idolizes coyotes, but there's a ton of misinformation within a lot of his writings and his speeches and stuff like that. Like one of the big things is coyotes don't go after antelope. Well, that is not true. I've witnessed it personally.
Me too.
Eh, like, and sure, that's anecdotal, but there's also studies to show that especially during the springtime, they're hammering the antelope, a lot of the antelope fawns and
The
stuff like
fawns,
that.
yeah.
Um, so there are, even though trapping might not be legal in these states, there is still, what's really weird to me, they're willing to pay trappers to go in and trap
Mhm.
to maintain these predator species, but they don't want the average everyday person to do that that would actually pay to do that.
Yes, and that's something I talk to people about all the time. So as a hunter, I pay. So the state, the agency gets funding that goes to support habitat and support wildlife. But instead, in California, in the 90s they got rid of mountain lion hunting, but they're spending how many millions of dollars now to have the agency kill mountain lions. And so is that meat getting eaten? If like if I'm a hunter, I'm going to kill the mountain lion, I'm going to eat the mountain lion. Like, and I think that's something, like I said, people don't understand. Like, bobcat tastes good, mountain lion tastes good, we do
Yeah.
eat it. There's some animals that I haven't tried yet that I don't know if I will or not, but I think they only think that we eat deer or, out west elk, and it's like these animals, the hunters contribute millions of dollars, outfitters contribute millions of dollars. And thinking of outfitters, we took a youngster with us when we were scouting yesterday. I told you, I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm going to be in the wilderness. This young man came with us, and we have a lot of beetle kill where we are. So we cut out like 20 trees, and we have to use cross-cut hand saws to cut these trees. And he's like, shouldn't the Forest Service be doing this? And it's like, well, funding isn't available. So here we are, hunters
Yep.
clearing the trails. And part of that makes migration corridors for the wildlife. They don't have, like, you have less animals there because there's so much beetle kill and stuff that the moose can't get through, the elk can't get through, smaller game can. But it's like we do a lot more than just shoot an animal.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, not to mention the fire issues and stuff like that. It really helps with that. Um, well, I know we've been on here for a little while, but do you have any closing thoughts um, as we close this thing out? I'd like to get um, anything that you want to put out there, how people can follow you, how people can get involved with or just gathering more information, whether they agree with us or not. I would like people to at least be informed and make their own decisions. Ultimately, I would like people to agree with us, but you know,
Well,
um,
I want to say get out there and educate yourself. Part of that, though, is the media doesn't give the whole story. And you try to have an unbiased process while you're educating yourself. Something that I do is I read ecology books that are probably to some people are quite boring, but study the ecology. Like one of the news outlets said that wolves take the same path every single time, and I'm like, okay, like that's a huge fallacy. Like, so be careful what you're learning. like Aaron said, you want to understand both sides. So it's uncomfortable, but go sit at some of those other tables and maybe just be a listener to start off with. Write down your questions. Try to understand someone else's point of view and perspective. And then also, as you said, like ultimately you'd like for somebody to think the way you think. And it's something that I've taught over the years is people are like, well, I don't want to go hunting, like I don't want to put in that work. And we've mentioned that a couple times while we've been visiting. And I've equated it to like, I love sushi. I don't want to make the sushi. Like I just want to go eat it. So not everybody has to be a hunter. And quite honestly, if everybody was a hunter, then you'd only probably get to hunt once in your lifetime if you're lucky because there's not enough animals because we do want that balance of species and um, let people know that are non-hunters that hunting isn't eliminating wildlife, it's balancing wildlife. If you visit with most hunters, they'd be willing to hunt every 2 years if it meant that they could still keep hunting. um, so it's just something that I think also collaborate. We talked about ranching when we started off. I mean, I kind of dove into hunting because hunting is a passion of mine. Um, but go sit with the ranchers and try to understand what they're going through, whether you're a hunter or if you're a wolf advocate. I don't know how many wolf advocates listen to your podcast, Aaron. Hopefully, a few.
Probably not many. I've really been trying. So I'm really trying to get all sides of any debate, right? And I really want people to be informed as possible. And especially with the wolf debate and stuff like that, I'm really, really trying to get a wolf advocate on the podcast.
I might have one for you.
That
So
would be outstanding.
I have a podcast, but I've been trying to figure out how to restructure it. I had a copyrights deal that ended up because the name of it is Mac Outdoors Podcast, which is Mia Anstein and Company. And so with that, people are always like, what's Mac Outdoors? And so when this copyright thing came through, it ended up being a nothing thing, but it also made me step back and I'm like, I want to rebrand. I want people to understand what I'm talking about, but I also am kind of going to pivot directions. But there's a wolf advocate from here in La Plata County that reached out to me after our meeting with Carter Parks and Wildlife that wants me to better understand her position. And I feel like I understand their position. And to me personally, I don't think it should be a fight against wolves. Like the ballot initiative already happened. I know there's maybe a coming initiative to try to reverse the original initiative. We already have like 30, well, almost 30 wolves here. Like, I think we're beyond reversing a ballot initiative. I think we need to figure out how to live with wolves, just like the Blackfoot tried to teach us, and Carter Parks and Wildlife is trying to teach us how to live with wolves. We need to figure that out. We need to figure out how to I think I'm talking about balance of wildlife, so let's balance that wildlife. I'm a hunter. Eventually I want to be in the key process of said balanced wildlife management, which would mean helping protect moose, helping protect elk and wolves and ecosystems. You mentioned Yellowstone before. Colorado's not Yellowstone. We have like 9 million people here, so we're not
Yeah.
Yellowstone. But this person, my daughter said, have him on your podcast, and I'm like, well, I'm not quite ready to reopen my podcast yet because I'm, like I said, dialing branding, but I will forward her contact information because I think she'd be a good one. She's willing to talk and communicate, and she might be a great guest. So maybe future episode would be with her.
Yeah, I'd love to have somebody on. And I think one of the biggest fears and that has been keeping a lot of those people off is I am a hunter, and
Mhm.
I don't think that I think that their perspective is that I'm going to be biased and it's just going to be an argument. And that's not what I want this to be. Ultimately, what I would like is to have somebody who is anti-wolf reintroduction and somebody who is pro-wolf reintroduction, and have them on separate podcasts. And then potentially, if we can I would be the mediator and keep it civil and have them actually talk, you
Right.
know. And uh I did have a guy that said that he would be on, and he said, "Well, if you're a legitimate podcast, then I'll do it." Well, there
Yeah.
was a word that I misspelled, just,
Because
and
we're
he goes,
human.
"Yeah," and he goes, "Oh, well, you must not be legitimate." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Okay, dude, whatever. I think you're
Maybe
just looking for excuses." But
yeah, I'm gonna say that's probably not the guest that you wanna have. Something that I did, I attended the National Assembly of Sportsmen's Caucuses in Bozeman a few years ago, and up there they had a bunch of wild horse advocates, and so I had them on, and they actually brought. I had 4 people on the episode, and they brought pro wild horse and people that are against wild horse, and we had a nice roundtable discussion that was very civil. But I think you have to bring the right people to the table. This woman that I'm mentioning, she's with the Southwest Colorado Wolf Co-op,
okay,
and definitely pro wolf. And I will say, I was against wolf introduction. I was against the ballot initiative. I kind of just felt like let them migrate in and let them be wild, let wildlife be wild. I don't hate wolves. I think people have a misconception that as a hunter, I hate wolves. I don't hate wolves. As a rancher, I hate wolves. I don't hate wolves. I feel like I should have a means, just like with my 2A rights and self defense. If I see a wolf attacking my cow out there, just like a coyote, I would shoot it. That's what I want from Mia's perspective, you know.
yeah. I
Um,
literally have video of a rancher from Colorado, um, in a thermal, watching his cows get attacked by wolves,
Yeah, and
and he's
ooh, that
afraid to do anything about it.
it hurts. Because the thing right now is we're supposed to be able to protect, but um, kind of like self-defense, you have to be prepared. If you're gonna protect your life, you're gonna go to jail. You're gonna have to be tried, and hopefully, you're gonna be found innocent and that you were self-defense. Um, I think a lot of ranchers are afraid to shoot wolves because we'll be felons, and none of us want to be felons. Like that's the last thing in the world that we want. Do I want to protect if I have a mini donkey, I've got 22 horses and mules, I've got sheep, I've got goats. Um, I want to protect them, and I think I even said that before they ever brought them here. So there's just different aspects. I think wolves are beautiful. Um, I've seen them in the wild. I've heard them howl in the wild, and it's like, do I have to have them in Colorado to have that? No, but they're here, and they've been here for a while.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah.
thank you very much. I appreciate it. I know on TikTok you haven't been doing a whole lot when it comes to the hunting side of things because TikTok is TikTok.
They ban you. My daughter laughs because I'm not bragging, but I'm one of the nicest people in the world that you would ever meet, and I share usually just happy and joy. On my Facebook, I've shared a lot of wolf stuff, um, just for information for ranchers in the area and stuff like that. But I'm on TikTok. I'm like on my second strike. It's like one more strike and I'm out, so I have to be so careful. What I share. I've done outfits of the day and forgot I had my break action shotgun. I'm like, here's my hunting vest, here's my pants, here's my boots. And then it's like, kaya. And I'm like, oh God.
Yeah. But that
So
is the platform for free speech. At least that's what everybody was saying.
I got banned from Truth Social.
Holy cow.
That's the only platform I've been banned from. I'm not sure why. I
Wow.
don't, and they won't even let me go in there to dispute or question or anything. And I'm like, whatever. So like, there's so many other platforms.
Yeah. On to the next one.
On to the next one. I don't have time for all of them. But yeah, I'm on TikTok, Mia Anstein. I do a lot of Instagram. So TikTok, you might see the story leading up on the hunt, but on Instagram, you might see the finale. Of the hunt. So- and my Instagram also leads over to I have a Mia Anstein page that way you can have the analytics to share with sponsors and stuff like that. People who I'm not sponsored by many people, but people who want to like sponsor podcasts and stuff like that. And then I have my personal Facebook page, and usually I share both crossover, but everywhere you can find me, it's just Mia Anstein. I'm not too creative with handles and stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Aaron. It's
All
good
right.
to chat with you.
Good talking to you.